specifically protected, whilst everyone else perhaps could get it but may not be particularly affected by it. It's a very different tack to what we've seen in Europe. I mean, today in Spain, for instance, they declared a state of national emergency. We've seen Denmark and the Czech Republic basically seal their borders. France has shut down all schools, right from nursery through all the way up to university, and yet Britain is going it alone. And there's been a lot of criticism here in the UK, a lot of people saying, well, why do we think that we should be doing things differently when we've got the sort of similar number of cases bubbling around the same numbers as other parts of Europe? The logic, we're told from the government, is that they don't want to do this total shutdown, specifically a shutdown of schools, because those school children would then have to go home, and we have a huge number of health workers in this country who will then have to look after their children rather than spending time in hospitals. And the doctors in Britain say, actually, this virus is not passed around by children. They are not a high-risk group, and to shut down schools medically doesn't actually help the situation. So the idea here is to allow the virus kind of to remain at a kind of a controllable level, but perhaps for a longer period of time in order that the health service can keep up. Tonight, though, we're hearing that Boris Johnson has kind of made a little bit of a U-turn in the sense that tomorrow we're due to hear that mass gatherings in this country are going to be banned. That was something that he didn't really want to do. Scotland has done it because they have the health issues in Scotland are devolved from the rest of the United Kingdom. But England, up until tonight, wasn't going to do that, but now we're hearing they might. So there might be a change in the government, but basically Britain doesn't want to go to the same sort of extremes as the rest of Europe.
All right, interesting take. James, we appreciate it. Thank you. And joining me now is Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who himself has tested positive for coronavirus and is under containment. Mayor, thanks so much for being on. How are you feeling?
Thank you so much. I'm feeling shocked, of course, for getting this news. I actually feel well. Having some mild symptoms, cold-like symptoms, but otherwise feeling very well, very healthy. Been working pretty much all day, and it just shocked, obviously. I mean, yesterday I was at a council meeting, and I received word that I was in a room with someone who had tested positive. Don't recall interacting with the person, but I could have shaken their hand or spoken to them briefly. The Department of Health asked me to come in and take a test along with some other high-ranking elected officials. They tested negative. I tested positive. So I've been in quarantine since I got the news. And obviously now, certainly this is a more intense process.
And what was that process like of getting tested and getting your results?
So the process was, as soon as I learned that I was in close proximity with someone who was infected, I implemented a self-quarantine immediately, along with other elected officials. And then the Department of Health called me. I went over to their location. I got swabbed. It's a swab test, not too dissimilar to a flu test. And then that was yesterday. Today, I received the news that I tested positive, and that created a whole other set of issues. First, I had to go public with it immediately. Secondly, from a continuing continuity of government perspective, I had to inform all the elected officials that I've been in contact with. Of course, our city manager, our police chief, they have decided to self-quarantine. Some of our council members have decided to self-quarantine, and so we're going through that process now.
I imagine it's a complicated one, but Mayor, with the chief of police now in self-quarantine, I know his results aren't back yet, but are you worried about possible ripple effects that may involve taking officers off the streets?
No, not yet. We have a continuity of operations plan that actually contemplates up to 40% of our workforce. Being infected and not being able to work. And that's something that we've been drilling for the last few weeks. So we've been preparing for this possibility. What I'm trying to do is now that I'm sort of a high profile person that is infected, is I'm going to do a diary, because what I want to do is sort of dispel the rumors and the understandable anxiety that people have about the possibility of getting infected. I feel well. Certainly, I'm sure I'm going to feel symptoms, but I want to document them and let the public know so that they can hopefully have a sense of comfort if inevitably more people get infected in our community.
And Mayor, we keep hearing repeated concerns about testing. What have you seen in your city, and how do you feel after hearing the president's announcement this afternoon?
What we're asking people to do is if you've come into contact with somebody that you know is infected, for example, anyone who's come into contact with me, what we're telling them is that they have to immediately self-quarantine. If within that quarantine period, you start to feel symptoms, you immediately have to get tested. The fear of sort of everyone getting tested is that it will create congregations of people, which is something we're actually trying to avoid, where sick people may be commingled with people that are not sick and that are healthy.
And Mayor, what's your advice for residents who might be scared or worried tonight?
Certainly do the things that everyone has been saying, wash your hands for at least 20 seconds, avoid, community association. I was one of the first mayors to cancel large events. I canceled Ultra and I canceled an 8th Street Festival, Ultra being 150,000 people, 8th Street about 250,000. And a lot of national leaders followed after that. So we don't want people congregating. We don't want people to panic either. And that's why I'm going to be doing this diary so that people can see how someone who's infected is affected by this virus.
And finally, Mayor, we know you are young, you are healthy, you hopefully will fall into the parameters of people who recover from this just fine. But what are you doing to make sure the most vulnerable people in your community are safe?
Well, the most vulnerable in our community are particularly the elderly. We are working with the county. The county is actually closing what they call elderly meal centers, which are congregation of elderly. We also, based on my emergency declaration, have the ability now to procure food, water, and ice, which we did and which we have done during hurricanes when there's loss of power. So we have the ability to feed our most vulnerable. And obviously, what we're hoping is that the hospitals have the capacity to deal with the most vulnerable, because we know that those are the ones, the elderly are the ones that have an enhanced risk of some severe complications.
Yeah, we know that capacity question is the chief concern throughout the country. Mayor Suarez, we appreciate your time and we're wishing you a speedy recovery.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we still have much more to get to tonight. As businesses continue to close or suspend operations, what will happen to those workers? We'll have more on that in a moment.
We all need someone who'll pull.
A fitting end to a wild week on Wall Street. Stocks soared today after historic losses yesterday. The Dow jumped nearly 2,000 points today, with major averages posting their biggest one-day gains since October of 2008. Today's rally comes as President Trump declared a national emergency to fight the coronavirus. The president says that move will open access to $50 billion for states as they continue to battle this outbreak. And when we return, the coronavirus is weighing on everyone emotionally. So how do we protect our mental health in these times of uncertainty? We'll speak with an expert. We'll also take a closer look at the toll this crisis has had on airline workers and the hospitality industry. But first, here are some of the trending stories on abcnews.com.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that? And when can you guarantee that every single American who needs a test will be able to have a test? What's the date of that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
Colorado reporting its first death from COVID-19, not long after President Trump declared a national emergency to fight the outbreaks. He says widespread testing will be available soon and that no, he doesn't take responsibility for the slow start, even though public health officials and lawmakers called it a failure.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
The president also announcing the government is waiving interest on federally held student loans.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying he'll remain in self-isolation following word that his wife Sophie tested positive for coronavirus.
I have no symptoms. I'm feeling good. And technology allows me to work from home.
There are reports that Brazil's president is also infected, claims he's denied on his Facebook page.
It was impossible not to notice how many handshakes and handling of the microphone was going on.
Please. Sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. Great job. Thank you very much.
Practice that.
You know, we have
to. One home healthcare executive who did
that was it. One
bump.
person.
The new travel restrictions for much of Europe kicking in today.
Europe has now become the epicenter of the pandemic, with more reported cases and deaths than the rest of the world combined, apart from China.
Americans at airports across Europe rushing to leave.
I want to get back to the United States before I have to be put in quarantine or something like that.
In Italy, where 60 million people are on lockdown, the death toll now climbing past 1,000.
The LA School District and Miami School Districts announcing they will close schools beginning Monday.
We are now in a stage where mitigating the spread of the virus is a responsibility of all of us.
New York City, the largest school district in the country, remains open.
And while Washington works on stimulus measures to address the economic toll of this pandemic, millions of workers continue to be impacted by the spread. Perhaps no industry has been harder hit than travel and tourism. Airline workers, hotel employees, they now all face an uncertain future as travel continues to slow over coronavirus fears. Gio Benitez has more.
As the nation focuses on how to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, millions of American workers are wondering if their jobs are on the line. On the front lines, hundreds of thousands of airline workers. The unprecedented cuts to flights already hurting their paychecks. Sarah Nelson is a flight attendant and heads up one of their biggest unions.
They're already feeling the effects of not having overtime hours. And now the airlines are asking people to take leaves. We just don't have access to the hours that we used to be able to have the kind of income that we had 3 months ago.
Major airlines canceling even more flights to and from Europe. Delta, United, and American Airlines are planning to operate a nearly full schedule of flights from Europe for a few more days to give Americans there time to get out. Then significant reductions. And now word that an American Airlines pilot tested positive for the novel coronavirus, a risk many of these workers know they are taking.
There's no way that we can completely protect ourselves from this virus, and we know that. But we take very serious precautions, and we approach this as any other first responder would.
And it's not just aviation. For the first time, several cruise lines are suspending operations. Royal Caribbean and Norwegian joining Disney Cruise Line, Princess and Viking Cruises in suspending operations. The voluntary suspensions ranging from 3 weeks to 2 months. Nelson now calling for a stimulus for workers in aviation and other economic support for the millions of workers in hospitality, travel, and healthcare.
As Congress is thinking about responding to this, tax cuts are not the answer. Loan guarantees are not the answer. Stimulating those companies directly without passing that directly on to the workers with paid sick leave and unemployment benefits that are extended are not going to help the economy. You've got to help those frontline workers.
And Gio joins me live on set now with more. Gio, so many people are expected to take a hit here.
Oh, absolutely. And Diane, when we're talking about these companies, we're not talking about the CEOs. We're not talking about the people who make a lot of money. We're talking about the hundreds of thousands of people who work for them. These are middle-class workers who are just trying to survive off these paychecks.
And what are those CEOs doing, particularly in the airline industry? Because I know that's a big area of concern.
So what's really interesting is Delta told us today that their CEO is actually giving up his salary, 100% of his salary. So that's interesting. They're also cutting so many flights. We know that Delta is actually eliminating all of the flights to continental Europe. So that's basically all of Europe. They're only going to maintain that service to the UK as long as the government allows flights to the UK. But this is what they're trying to do. They are trying to cut these flights because they say that's how they're going to avoid these furloughs and these layoffs. But that's becoming increasingly tougher here. And I think a lot of people are going to be wondering what's going to be happening to my job if this keeps going for weeks and weeks and weeks.
So could those layoffs and furloughs be inevitable?
They might be. I mean, we just don't know just yet. They are still using the word furloughs only. They're not saying layoffs. I spoke with a United executive who said furloughs, that is what we are trying to avoid right now. But it's getting harder, Diane. I mean, so many of these flights are being canceled. These planes are just sitting there, not being used.
All right, Gio Benitez, always great to have you, Gio. Thanks.
Thank you.
And starting today, TSA is allowing passengers to fly with liquid hand sanitizer containers up to 12 ounces. This is in contrast to the usual 3.4-ounce limit. It's the first time there has been an exception to that rule since it went into effect in 2006. The TSA says passengers should expect that these large containers will be screened separately, which will add some time to the process. And now to the growing number of hoaxes popping up online. From false claims about treatments to fake headlines about celebrities having the virus, misinformation is spreading fast. Our Will Reeve has more on the bad actors trying to muddy the waters and sometimes scam people.
As the number of coronavirus cases increases in the United States, so too do internet scams and hoaxes. Like this fake BBC Twitter account falsely claiming Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe had tested positive for COVID-19. Radcliffe says he was surprised when he heard the rumor. And after actor Tom Hanks announced he and his wife Rita Wilson had contracted the virus, Twitter blew up. 20,000 plus retweets of this photo of Hanks quarantined with a volleyball, a nod to his character in Castaway. But the photo isn't real. It's edited from a picture of Hanks at a 2015 New York Rangers game. On Facebook, fake posts offering tips from doctors, like this one claiming to be from a Stanford Hospital board member, going viral, offering this self-test for people, telling them to hold your breath for more than 10 seconds, saying if they have no discomfort, that basically indicates no infection. That's been debunked. Stanford saying it did not come from them. Officials are warning the public not to fall for fake cures peddled by some companies and individuals, possibly trying to scam consumers with their claims. Earlier this week, the FTC and FDA issued warnings to 7 companies accused of selling unapproved or misbranded products, claiming they can treat or cure COVID-19 with teas, essential oils, and colloidal silver. Televangelist Jim Baker received one such warning for offering an $80 silver solution he advertised as a treatment for coronavirus, even though there is not yet a known vaccine. And conspiracy theorist Alex Jones received a cease and desist letter for hawking unproven products from New York Attorney General Letitia James, one of several she and other states' attorneys general have issued in recent days to people they say are selling unproven products.
Our thanks to Will for that important report. Coming up, we're going to check in on our mental health during these tense times. That is, we will also get an update from our friends under quarantine at Travis Air Force Base.
What's the one daytime show people...
ABC News, straightforward.
During this time when there's so much focus on our physical health, it's important not to forget about our mental health. With all the changes happening as we overcome this pandemic, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and stressed. So joining us now is board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Jessica Clemens. Dr. Clemens, thank you for being here. We know that social distancing can lead to fewer personal interactions, which can make it harder to control your stress, your emotions, your anxiety. So how do you help avoid these feelings at a time like this?
Absolutely. So to begin, this is a time where a lot of people are feeling anxiety. Quite frankly, I imagine most people are, right? Forget the 40 million people who already experience anxiety disorders. So what I tell people in times like these is, especially with social distancing, to be creative about ways to remain engaged with people in their lives, right? So if you're at home because schools are, closed, or you're working from home now, do things like FaceTime. FaceTime your family members. Make sure that you're checking in a very intentional way. Also check on your neighbors, doing things to remain engaged and not really overdoing it with the social distancing. You don't have to completely avoid anyone, obviously, unless you are quarantined, but it's going to be important to do that because, again, isolation can make one feel even more depressed, anxious, and continue to have those thoughts that are really hard to get out of a loop once you've started it.
When it comes to your setup at home, are there things you can do to make the environment more comforting?
Absolutely. So, now that we're kind of going into spring, at least here in New York, one of the great things is that you can absolutely engage, get that sunlight coming into your home, try to do things to really change the environment in a way that you feel, more calm, right? So if you have access to greenery, doing things like that, but also really using the space in a meaningful way. So doing things like yoga, exercising within the home, right? Really using what you have access to keep yourself active and motivated.
And then one of the symptoms of coronavirus is difficulty breathing, but that can also be a symptom of anxiety. So how do you tell the difference?
So I always tell people with anxiety, typically the only symptom that a person is experiencing is not just shortness of breath, right? So it typically is associated with things like having trouble feeling like your heart is racing or feeling tremulous, or perhaps being brought on by an anxious thought. With coronavirus, shortness of breath is certainly a sign, but also it's typically associated with things like fever or cough or being exposed to someone who is either infected with coronavirus or coming from a place that has already a pretty high rate. So I tell people, look, if you're feeling anxious and you suddenly can't catch your breath, try to take a breath. And if you find that relieves your symptoms, it probably is not coronavirus, but when in doubt, get professional attention.
And then we get questions by so many parents wondering, how do I talk to my kids about this?
So I think it's important to not lean towards trying to give them false hope, right? It's important to just be honest about what's happening, be honest about the fact that we're all trying to be protected, safeguard ourselves, but also give them opportunities to focus on other things. So try to do things to keep them entertained, play games, bring back some of the old school things like cooking together, spending time together, but again, being very honest about what's happening and listening. Listening is it's going to be very important in that relationship with your child. Don't try to tell them how they should feel, but be open to what they share about the experience, right? It's tough to be, out of school if you were expecting to spend time with your friends and now, classes are canceled for the rest of the semester. So it's just important to really stay in tune and stay engaged with them and really be supportive during this time.
Great advice. Dr. Clemens, thanks for being on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And before we go, we want to check in with our friend Michelle Heckert, who is spending lots of quality time with her grandparents at Travis Air Force Base after nearly 24 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed on their cruise ship. Take a look.
Hi.
The past day or so.
We're doing well. Continue to do well. Enjoying the meals. Too much, though.
At lunchtime today, when they delivered our meals, they also delivered some more masks for us, so we don't have to keep using the same ones and breathing the same air inside of them. And they also delivered some of these thermometers so that we can keep track of our own temperatures.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Who am I talking to?
ABC.
ABC? Oh my gosh.
Your favorite program. Well, we're happy. Let me see, what else can we say? Other than that's all we do is eat and sleep
and watch TV.
Yeah, and then we do some exercises. Yeah.
Grandpa was trying to do some Tai Chi today, self-directed.
Yeah.
And
his own style, but it was exercise.
But otherwise, this is his, place on the couch.
That's he's making an imprint on the couch.
But I think we have about 10 more days to go, maybe.
Aren't they the best? Well, Michelle, Grandma, Grandpa, we hope that you guys are enjoying yourselves there as much as you can. We hope you have a great weekend, and we hope you at home have a great weekend as well. That's our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context, analysis, and all the information you need on the day's top stories. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with everybody. Stay safe.
Mic check. Mic check, mic check. Testing 1, 2. Yay. Shout out to Rasta Jimmy for the donation. Brother Tehran, shout out to you, Playboy, for the donation. So yeah, family, the coronavirus is out there and spreading fast and causing fear. I can't believe I left that TV on. Hold on for a second. I can't open up the StreamYards. Excuse me. If anybody want to join the panel, give their input on these current events that have transpired over the last 24 hours. It's crazy out there right now.
to get the report back.
Where are the test kits? Why don't doctors have them? Because it's not a kit sent to your doctor, it's a test the lab uses. It's not a blood test, but a standard swab.
As Dr. Jen said, to see him shaking hands over and over after he has already been in contact, we can see it on the pictures and the video, with someone who has tested positive for this coronavirus.
And Terry, one of the other things we saw on that point, I was talking to Tom Boster about this, the president saying he's not taking responsibility for any failures in testing, not taking responsibility for dismantling the NSC Office on Global Health Security either. And as that was going on through the press conference, he also managed to work in some blame for the previous administration.
He did. Look, I think everybody knows the president is somebody who likes to take credit, doesn't like to take blame. It's the old saying of Napoleon, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. Well, credit has one father in this administration, and defeat has a lot of others, or failure. And he does want essentially to shift the responsibility. Even though he's been president for more than 3 years now, he wants to shift the responsibility for anything that goes wrong to the previous administration. Every president inherits benefits from the previous administration and shortcomings, and this president wants to make sure everybody knows that some of them were shortcomings. Whatever the reason, he's got to, as he is today, move forward on marshaling the resources of the federal government. That's the bottom line today. This national emergency declaration does let him and his administration marshal the resources, the money, and get after this problem.
That is the big action today. Terry Moran, thanks very much.
Our thanks to George and our other contributors for that report. So how long can we expect things to get worse before they get better? ABC senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega posed that question and many more to Dr. Anthony Fauci from the president's task force. Here's what he told Cecilia on Good Morning America.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for being with us at this critical time right now. I want to start with where we are exactly in this country at this moment. We are seeing school closures. We are seeing events canceled, a complete change in how we are all living our lives. How bad is this going to get before it gets better?
Well, it's certainly going to get worse before it gets better. And the kinds of mitigation strategies, containment and mitigations that you're talking about, is to do that kind of physical separation of people, which is one of the very effective ways that you can really mitigate the spread of the virus. If you look at the pattern of viruses, particularly these types of viruses, and even look at what's gone on in China and in Italy and in South Korea, you go along like this, the way we were, and then you have a big spike that goes way up, and then after a while, after much disease and suffering and death, it comes back down again. The purpose of the mitigation is to get that peak and to blunt it so that it's a bit of a hill as opposed to a mountain. We're at a critical point now, more in some regions of the country than in others, but in general, the kinds of things that are going on will hopefully make that blunting of that peak so that we could save a lot of lives and save a lot of illness.
But to be clear, we have not peaked yet.
No, there's no doubt that we have not peaked yet.
I think it's frightening for a lot of people to see what we're seeing in places like Italy and places like China. Are we working toward a gradual shutdown of our country here at home?
You know, it's very difficult to predict, Cecilia. I'm not sure we're going to get to that. I think that would be really rather dramatic. But I can tell you that all things are on the table. We just have to respond as things evolve over the days and over the weeks.
Dr. Fauci, if the most vulnerable group is the elderly right now, we're seeing all of these school closures around the country. Is that the right move for children and families?
Well, I think it should be done in a proportionate way. And I mean, I think what's going on right now is generally an appropriate approach. But people need to understand, even though it's clear from our experience that children, young adults do very well for the most part. They are not the most vulnerable, but they do get infected. And if they get infected, and the crowding of the school is a perfect place for that to happen, they may do well, but then they go home and there's grandma and grandpa and an uncle or an aunt or a mother or father who actually have an underlying condition that'll make them more vulnerable.
You know, this testing is top of mind for so many of us right now, and you made some headlines with your very candid and blunt assessment of the state of testing. You said the health system is failing at providing adequate testing when you were testifying before Congress. Dr. Fauci, are there people who are walking around right now who have the virus and don't know it because of this lack of testing?
Well, I'm not so sure it's because of the lack of testing. But I think clearly the system as it was originally designed was very good for what it was designed for. Now looking forward, we're changing it rapidly. So, you know, rather than playing Monday morning quarterback, let's look ahead. And I believe what we're hearing at the task force, that we are now getting into that phase where we'll be able to really scale it up a lot. I think in the next week or so, you're going to see an acceleration of availability of tests.
Well, I want to get your take on the messaging from the White House right now, because it was just yesterday that President Trump himself said that, frankly, the testing has been, quote, very smooth. Are Americans getting mixed messages on this front? Is it accurate, Dr. Fauci, to say that the testing has been very smooth?
Well, you know, I think, again, I don't want to be getting
If you shop on Amazon, you should
He's saying many of the testing kits that they've received there by the government are missing key components. He's comparing this to he's comparing these testing kits to printers without ink. Isn't that just unacceptable at this stage?
That was an unfortunate situation. Right now, it's being corrected and is being corrected.
Okay, I've got to ask you just quickly about President Trump and the photos that I'm sure you've seen of him standing next to the Brazilian official who has since tested positive. People are of the mind, I think, that if you come into contact with someone who has tested positive, that you yourself should be self-monitoring, or perhaps even in isolation, getting tested. Should all of those things apply to the president?
You know, I leave that to the president's White House physician, who's an extremely competent individual who I know well, and the decisions there were between what would be a potential patient and the physician. So I'll leave that decision to them.
But if you came into contact with someone who tested positive, would you yourself get tested?
Well, it would be the circumstances. Likely I would, but, you know, I'm not sure. It depends on the circumstances. But I think we should follow the guidelines of the CDC about when you are at a risk, what you should do.
And finally, Dr. Fauci, as people are working from home today and we're seeing these shutdowns all over the country, what's your message? How long are we going to be living like this?
You know, it's going to be at least a matter of several weeks. I mean, it's unpredictable, but if you look at historically how these things work, it'll likely be anywhere from a few weeks to up to 8 weeks or more. I hope it's going to be in the earlier part, let's say 2, 3, 4 weeks. But it's really impossible to make an accurate prediction.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good to be with you.
Our thanks to Cecilia and Dr. Fauci. We should note that conversation took place before this afternoon's announcement from the president. During that announcement, Dr. Fauci said that he believes these new efforts will address the previous failings in the system with regard to testing. Coming up next on ABC News All Access, the coronavirus bringing an alarming rise in hate crimes within Asian American communities, with some incidents even caught on camera. We'll show you them after this.
This is what being live is all about.
I can see pushing through.
This is ABC News
Entire
Live.
neighborhoods are underwater.
The 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News.
Here goes.
Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video.
That's a grenade.
Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
Go
We're
there
trying
now.
to put this fire out right now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw,
Welcome to
live.
the Columbus Zoo.
No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
It's frightening.
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free.
Wow!
Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live. Streaming everywhere, right to you.
This historic year, with so much on the line, to make sense of it all roads lead through George Stephanopoulos, ABC News. No more with
You know the deal.
Where can I sign up? George Stephanopoulos, Sundays on This Week with George.
Oh, unbelievable.
Mornings on Good Morning America, America's most watched morning show. Get the bottom line from George.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Welcome back to ABC News All Access. With many large institutions and public gatherings shutting down for the foreseeable future, what exactly does that mean for religious gathering places like churches, synagogues, and mosques? And how are faith leaders addressing this issue with their constituents? Caitlin Beatty of Christianity Today magazine offered me her take earlier today. Caitlin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder, this virus spread, it obviously spreads so much more quickly when people are in close proximity, which tends to be the norm at religious gatherings. So how are places of worship handling this?
So in a place like New York, you have a lot of people just canceling services. You know, the risk is too great, especially if you have elderly people in your congregation. Most churches do. If you have people with compromised immune systems, the church is supposed to care for the most vulnerable. And right now, what that looks like is either canceling services or finding more creative ways to still connect, but turning to digital forms of worship, whether that is having your preacher preach a sermon and you watch at home, or gathering in small groups, or even connecting on something like a Zoom gathering and praying for each other over a Zoom gathering. So it's a weird time to be, part of what it means to be in a religious community is to gather with other people. Right. But I think it's also an opportunity to get creative, to still be present to each other and to support one another, even if you're not in physical closeness.
How are you seeing religion and science interact right now?
So I think a lot of people think that you can't be for both, or you can't turn to both religion and science in a crisis like this. But when you look at how most people live their lives, I think there are plenty of scientists, people in the scientific community who are religiously observant who are probably praying right now for a vaccine, for a breakthrough, for more information on how to contain the spread of COVID-19. You also have religious people who are turning to the scientific community and saying, look, we need to trust this community. We need to trust their findings. We need to take their findings seriously. And so I think these two arenas of human life and human knowledge can coexist right now and actually need each other. Science is a really important way of finding truth. Religion, for a lot of people, for most people the world over, is also a really important way of finding truth and also finding hope and solace and, a path forward.
Do you find that this is impacting faith at all? Is it a trying time for faith, or is this bolstering faith?
It is my view that it's a really exciting time for faith, because the reality is that in crisis moments like this, we realize that humans are limited in their knowledge. We only know so much. We don't know the future. We need some external source of hope. And we're also all connected. Something like this, like COVID-19, reminds us we can't just be thinking about ourselves. We have to be thinking about our neighbors. And that is the central call of most of the world religions, is to be treating your neighbor as you would treat yourself, to love your neighbor as yourself. And this is a moment where we can really draw together and remember that, even if that means we're not physically, social distancing is a form of social compassion and love in this unique moment.
That's such a great take on it.
Yeah.
Caitlin Beatty, we appreciate you being on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Travel restrictions announced by President Trump on Wednesday take effect today, limiting travel from 26 European countries to the U.S. for 30 days. ABC's Maggie Rulli is in London with the latest on that.
That travel ban that President Trump announced this week between most European countries and the U.S. is going into effect today, and we are seeing Americans scrambling all over Europe, trying to catch some of these last flights out of the continent back home. Look at this airport in Barcelona. It is absolute chaos at times. Many people telling us that when they show up at airports, even as early as 6 a.m., there are already hundreds of people in line waiting to change their flights, trying to get on those, again, final few flights between many European countries and the United States. There's still also a lot of confusion. Other people telling us they were screened. Other people saying they were never screened, just asked questions about if they'd been to China, but never asked questions about other European countries. So as this is rolled out, there is still much confusion and questions. People saying they hope that gets cleared up over the next few weeks. This is something we're seeing across Europe. Many countries are shutting down their borders entirely or introducing severe restrictions. Here in the UK, the government recently announced that while there's about 500 reported cases, they actually think there could be as many as 20 times more than that. They're saying 5 to 10,000 cases are already here in the UK, and they say this is just the beginning. They expect that number to go up exponentially, and it's because of this spread, because of these numbers, that so many countries are now locking down, taking these precautions. We're seeing events canceled across Europe. We're seeing multiple countries shutting down their entire school systems. Countries like France, like Norway, have already announced the closures of schools and universities. And again, what we're hearing from experts is that this is just the beginning. They're expecting these types of closures and precautions to potentially go on for weeks. Maggie Rulli, ABC News, London.
As fear about the coronavirus rises, so too do reports of discrimination and even hate crimes against Asian Americans. Our Kira Phillips has that story.
It's disturbing and disheartening.
If you are from China, I'm surprised they even let you over here.
We're talking about racially motivated crimes inspired by fear over the coronavirus.
No, I'm going to share it to my family.
As COVID-19 spreads across the United States, so does an alarming rise in hate crimes within Asian American communities.
Why did they do that to this car? My heart just sunk.
This car vandalized in California. The language too disturbing to show you. And the Chandy family is devastated. Anna, in tears, forced to explain to her child what the racial slurs mean.
Why are they being racist to us? We don't even have the coronavirus.
And then there's this video posted to Facebook, now part of an NYPD hate crime investigation.
So move.
The video horrifying. An Asian American minding his own business as a total stranger berates him before spraying him with Febreze. New York City's transit department now calling this incident racist. The CDC also weighing in now, saying that being of Asian descent does not increase the chance of getting or spreading COVID-19.
So I'm breathing this and I'm breathing everything that they bring to our country, you feel me? And that's a pandemic.
But many Asian Americans are increasingly reporting that they're being singled out.
If you're from China, I need to know.
In videos filled with misinformation being shared on social media, on the street, and in schools. Dylan Mariano's family says their son was discriminated against by a teacher who claims he mistook coughing as a sign that the 13-year-old had COVID-19. Dylan says he was coughing because he was choking on water.
This was the first time that I've ever felt I was being treated differently for being Asian.
Dylan and his family are now suing Walter Reed Middle School and the Los Angeles Unified School District, saying other non-Asian students in his class don't face the same type of treatment. The school district not responding to our requests for comment.
He actually said to me, he goes, all the other students who are coughing, they don't get sent out, but they're not Asian.
Mixed messaging not helpful as certain politicians, like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, one of several House conservatives, calling COVID-19 a Chinese or Wuhan coronavirus. Now, Asian community advocates around the country are speaking out.
I think this is kind of unprecedented. This is not just affecting Chinatown here, it's affecting Chinatown in North America and globally.
From foot traffic to small businesses, Chinatowns and Asian American communities across the country severely impacted in the face of COVID-19.
I think there's a great deal of misplaced fear directed at the Asian community, which is very, very unfortunate because this disease is not ethnic-centric.
For 40 years, Jing Fong has been an institution in New York. Now, the largest restaurant in Chinatown is closing down temporarily in the middle of the week.
If this continues for another 2 months, we don't know if we're going to remain open anymore.
With a staff of 180 employees, Jing Fong is seeking ways to keep the lights on.
On a busy holiday, about 75% tourists. On a normal, like Chinese New Year, it's maybe 25% tourists. But now we get 0 tourists.
Temporary closures and steep discounts hitting these restaurants hard, and business owners trying to figure out how they'll make ends meet.
呢個絕對係我哋最重要嘅問題就係咁樣，開又係死，唔開又係死，等係睇點死法，死唔死係咪病菌死咧？定還是係閂門冇生意死？
Local Chinese businesses are taking measures to mitigate panic and fight public perception.
People are very concerned. We understand their feelings, but actually it's hurting us too.
Fear of coronavirus impacting Los Angeles, California, too.
And we just wanted to try our best to protect the customer and our employee.
The increased racial tension has also led to a rise in gun sales in parts of the country. Some Asian Americans feel unsafe, and they're beginning to arm themselves in response.
Well, last year we did with this company about $100,000, and year to date we already did like almost $70,000 sales.
Arcadia firearm and safety owner David Liu says business is booming.
This is like a sales for my purchase for last 4 months of 2019, and this is how much we have. Just this little binder, and this is what we have for this year. All this here.
And as people in times of crisis have turned to buying guns before, some Asian Americans are doubling down, fearing not only a spreading virus, but also a rise in racism that's forcing them to take drastic measures.
Why did you decide to buy a gun right now?
For self-defense.
Our thanks to Kira for that report. UNICEF is also now speaking out on this issue with an article titled 5 Ways to Fight Racism and Xenophobia. Check that out on unicefusa.org. When we come back, from the world of sports to the Great White Way, how coronavirus is impacting events all across the country. Stay with us.
stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis. 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, I'm grateful you woke up this morning.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning, sunshine. We've been waiting for you. Say good morning. Good morning, sunshine. In America. Say good morning. I want you to wake me up.
This historic year, with so much on the line, to make sense of it all roads lead through George Stephanopoulos, ABC News. No more with
You know the deal.
Where can I sign up?
George Stephanopoulos. Sundays on This Week with George.
Oh, unbelievable.
Mornings on Good Morning America, America's most watched morning show. Get the bottom line from George. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC. In one place, the vital information, the straightforward facts, what you need to know, helping you protect yourself and your family. ABC News. Outbreak. Your questions answered here.
We're back now with the growing list of big events postponed or canceled due to the coronavirus. More states are banning large gatherings, from concerts to the Masters Golf Tournament and the next two NASCAR races in Atlanta and Miami. ABC's Kenneth Moten has the details.
From sports to concerts to the theater, billions of dollars are being lost because of the cancellations as the coronavirus spreads. The impact still unclear, but one economist is already predicting the U.S. gross domestic product will drop by 4% this quarter, the worst since the Great Recession of 2008.
We're dealing with an unprecedented situation here. It's a fluid situation, changing minute by minute, and we don't have a blueprint.
This morning's New York Post declaring the day the sports world stopped as leagues cancel and suspend upcoming events, including the NCAA's March Madness. The St. John's Creighton basketball game at Madison Square Garden stopping at halftime after the NCAA's announcement. The NBA suspending its season, the commissioner saying the hiatus will likely last for at least 30 days. The NHL and Major League Soccer also suspending their seasons. Major League Baseball canceling spring training and delaying the start of the regular season. Annual revenues for those leagues total more than $30 billion. And that doesn't include the lost revenue for stadium concession stands, vendors, and broadcasters. Theme parks closing. Disney World in Orlando announcing it will close after this weekend until at least the end of March. Late night comedy also affected. Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers suspending the production of their shows. And on Broadway, the show did not go on. Theaters are closed for at least a month.
One producer has $20 million invested in his show, and he may lose every bit of that.
Concert giant Live Nation halting all large-scale tours until April. Big-name tours impacted include Cher, Billie Eilish, and Post Malone. And a possible sign of things to come, just outside Manhattan in Jersey City, a 10 p.m. curfew for bars and some restaurants to reduce large crowds.
We've been coming for 30 years. I've never been in bed by 9 o'clock.
Our thanks to Kenneth Moten for that report. And as sporting events around the world are postponed or canceled due to the crisis, what kind of secondary impact could there be? Even during World War II, Major League Baseball played on. ESPN's Jeremy Schaap offers some perspective.
These are the times when we're reminded of what sports mean to us and how little they can matter. Amid great national traumas, the question arises, to play or not to play. In World War II, FDR said baseball, then the most important sport, must go on. After the assassination of John Kennedy, the NFL played on. Pete Rozelle said it was his biggest regret. But after 9/11, the games did stop, not just to mourn those who had been killed, but also to assess security measures. Obviously, this is a different moment because this is the first time in living memory that just by allowing athletes and fans into arenas, a crisis would be made worse. The experts have been clear. Big crowds with tens of thousands of people right on top of each other is not the way to arrest the spread of the coronavirus. In other parts of the world where the rhythms of daily life have come nearly to a standstill, we've seen the empty stadiums and the cancellations. Now we're seeing them here too. Common sense is prevailing. This kind of disruption in sports is unprecedented.
This is much bigger than basketball. If one player, two players, whatever it is, already have it, we'll have to act accordingly, and I think the NBA made the right decision.
The issue, of course, is that sports aren't sealed off from everything else, which is why the stakes right now are so high.
Our thanks to Jeremy for that report. And you might have heard Mark Cuban there saying the NBA made the right decision to suspend the season. Well, ABC News Live anchor Lindsay Davis spoke with the Dallas Mavericks owner about what steps the league is taking and when they might resume play.
Mark, thanks so much for making time in what's probably an incredibly busy and difficult time for you and your team.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Thanks for having me. It's just unbelievable, just not something you ever could have anticipated.
I'm sure. Now, you just got off of a league-wide conference call with all the owners. Any new information that you can share with us about what the league plans to do next? And do you see the NBA season resuming at some point?
I hope it resumes. Nothing really I can share. I mean, other than the league is going to do what's best for the safety of our employees and for the fans and customers. We're going to try to do the right thing.
Given how connected the league is, are any of your players or coaches planning on quarantining at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we've asked everybody to self-quarantine. You just never know what exposure you've had. And, but we're treating it no differently than we're doing with all the other employees that we have. Everybody's got to be vigilant. Everybody's got to be careful and really just, close your circle of friends so that you're not exposed to people that you otherwise don't know.
Were you uneasy at all about having your team finish the game last night? I mean, was there any thought of suspending the game in the middle after the news came out?
I mean, it always crosses your mind, as it did mine, but, because it was so stunning. But no, I mean, we had 17,000 people who were in the arena, and not because of the number that we went suspended, but, I mean, we just didn't feel like anybody was at risk. If somebody was at risk or we felt that there was a safety risk, then we wouldn't have had the game in the first place.
And you said last night that this isn't about basketball. You have a mom who's 82 years old and kids. What are you doing to try to ensure that they stay safe?
Just trying to be vigilant, as I said. I mean, trying to reduce their circle of friends, keeping, they're about to go into spring break, and rather than going into some place that's going to be populous and crowded, just, creating family time. This is going to be the definition of forced family fun. We're going to have things that, we're going to have things that we have to do.
Whether you like it or not, you're staying at home with your family. So what are you and other
Exactly.
What are you and other owners plan on doing to try to compensate hourly workers who now won't be working?
Well, I can't speak for other owners, but, it was a program that I put together for our arena workers and hourly workers that work for the Mavericks, because now that the games are suspended, they're not going to have that income. And so that just wasn't right to me. So we'll compensate them in advance. Even if the games might be played in the future, we'll still compensate them now so they can pay their bills. And we'll do that for arena employees for the Mavs games and for hourly employees that work for the Mavericks that might not get those hours.
And just curious, on a personal level, do you feel that the government is doing enough, and might you consider using your own resources to help the Texas community?
You know what? I don't know. You can come to conclusions on both sides, but I do know that I'm not a big fan of trickle down, but I am a big fan of trickle up economics, where people that are in my position really try to support the community, really encourage people to work with contractors that, South by Southwest was canceled. There are contractors there. There are events. There's weddings that are being canceled left and right. And so where we can support those vendors, where I can give them extra work, where, we can do anything to help them and encourage others to do the same, that's exactly what we're going to do. Because this is a community effort, and North Texas is great about this. And we really just have to support those around us, because that's just the only thing that's going to work.
And finally, back to sports for a moment, because it is a welcome distraction for so many Americans, as you know. The CEO of the Atlanta Hawks suggested at a conference last week that the NBA should slide the season so that the playoffs and finals go into July or even August. If you're able to resume this season, is that something that you think that the league should do as a trial this summer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, safety first, and that's the primary consideration. But beyond that, and I've had the conversation with the league for years that we really could go into July and August. The argument has been there aren't enough homes watching television. But as you know, the television industry has changed dramatically, so that might be different this summer. I'm all for playing over the summer.
All right, Mark, thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Coming up, coronavirus hoaxes. We'll do some myth busting from celebrities rumored to have the virus and so-called treatments after this.
This is what being live is all about.
I can see pushing through.
This is ABC News
Entire
Live.
neighborhoods are underwater.
24/7 streaming news source from ABC News.
There goes.
Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video.
That's a grenade.
Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
Go
We're
there
trying
now.
to put this fire out right
With
now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw,
Welcome to
live.
the Columbus Zoo.
No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
It's frightening.
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
Welcome back to ABC News All Access. It is time to do some myth busting. From false claims about coronavirus treatments to fake headlines about celebrities, ABC's Will Reeve debunks some misinformation.
As the number of coronavirus cases increases in the United States, so too do internet scams and hoaxes. Like this fake BBC Twitter account falsely claiming Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe had tested positive for COVID-19.
Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin.
Radcliffe says he was surprised when he heard the rumor, joking,
I think it's just because I look ill all the time, so you can believably say it about me because I'm very pale.
And after actor Tom Hanks announced he and his wife Rita Wilson had contracted the virus, Twitter blew up. 20,000 plus retweets of this photo of Hanks quarantined with a volleyball, a nod to his character in Castaway. But the photo isn't real. It's edited from a picture of Hanks at a 2015 New York Rangers game. On Facebook, fake posts offering tips from doctors, like this one claiming to be from a Stanford Hospital board member, going viral, offering this self-test for people, telling them to hold your breath for more than 10 seconds, saying if they have no discomfort, that basically indicates no infection. That's been debunked. Stanford saying it did not come from them. Officials are warning the public not to fall for fake cures peddled by some companies and individuals, possibly trying to scam consumers with their claims. Earlier this week, the FTC and FDA issued warnings to 7 companies accused of selling unapproved or misbranded products, claiming they can treat or cure COVID-19 with teas, essential oils, and colloidal silver. Televangelist Jim Baker received one such warning for offering an $80 silver solution he advertised as a treatment for coronavirus, even though there is not yet a known vaccine. And conspiracy theorist Alex Jones received a cease and desist letter for hawking unproven products from New York Attorney General Letitia James, one of several she and other states' attorneys general have issued in recent days to people they say are selling unproven products.
Thanks, Will. And rumors have also been circulating that mass transit in New York City has been shut down. Those were so rampant, the New York Police Department even had to address it. Writing on Twitter, there is a lot of misinformation on social media, and one tweet in particular is